What if the quarterback controversy everyone blamed on the rookie wasn't really about the rookie at all? And now, with similar whispers starting again in Atlanta, fans are asking a dangerous question: is this just bad luck, or is there a pattern forming around Kevin Stefanski that nobody wants to admit? When Kevin Stefanski first took control of the Cleveland Browns, the expectation was stability, offensive structure, quarterback clarity. Instead, what unfolded felt like controlled chaos. Injuries piled up, play calling came under scrutiny, and the most important position on the field never truly felt settled. Deshaun Watson's situation hovered over everything. Massive contract, massive expectations, limited availability. When he did play, the results were inconsistent. The offense looked hesitant, timing felt off, protection issues surfaced, and suddenly the locker room was navigating uncertainty week after week. Some analysts defended Stefanski, arguing that no coach can build rhythm with constant disruption. Others quietly questioned whether the system itself was flexible enough to adapt. Then came the rookie subplot. Shedeur Sanders entered the league with hype, confidence, and a spotlight already fixed on him. But he didn't walk into a calm environment. He walked into tension. Veteran expectations, media noise, a fan base desperate for immediate answers. Instead of gradual development, every snap felt like a referendum. Every incompletion sparked debate. Was he ready? Was he overrated? Or was he simply learning inside a fractured structure? Some fans believe the narrative around Sanders hardened too quickly. Before he could grow into the role, criticism accelerated. National voices pointed to mechanics, decision-making, pocket awareness. But others countered with a different angle: what rookie quarterback thrives in a system that's already under pressure? That's where the divide began. Supporters of Stefanski argued that play design was sound, that execution was the real issue. Critics pointed out moments where adjustments seemed late, where protection schemes didn't help a young quarterback settle in. The offense, at times, looked predictable, and when predictability meets NFL defenses, things unravel fast. But here, what made the situation even more complicated: public messaging. Stefanski remained measured, professional. He never threw players under the bus. Yet he also rarely delivered that unmistakable "this is our guy" declaration that can stabilize a locker room. In today's NFL, confidence isn't just internal, it's broadcasted. And when that vocal endorsement feels muted, speculation grows. By midseason, the Browns weren't just battling opponents, they were battling narrative. Was this roster flawed? Was the coaching approach too rigid? Or was Sanders simply experiencing the harsh reality of NFL speed? The truth likely sits somewhere in the middle. Development rarely happens in perfect conditions, but perception shapes careers, and in Cleveland, perception turned fast. What started as a promising reset began to feel like instability all over again. But Cleveland was only the beginning. Shedeur Sanders entered the draft process with momentum, big game experience, national exposure, confidence that some scouts admired and others quietly questioned. For months, projections had him floating near the top tier of quarterback discussions. Then something shifted. As draft week approached, the tone changed. Analysts who once praised his poise began dissecting flaws more aggressively. Arm strength debates grew louder. Questions about system translation surfaced. Some evaluators pointed to mechanics under pressure. Others brought up body language. The conversation didn't just become critical, it became divided. And when draft night finally arrived, the slide began. Teams that were rumored to have interest passed, then passed again. Cameras caught the reactions. Social media reacted in real time. Fans started asking whether this was strategic patience from front offices or something deeper. Was it purely football evaluation, or had the narrative around Sanders subtly hardened behind the scenes? Some fans believe the framing played a role. Throughout the pre-draft cycle, Sanders' confidence was frequently labeled as flashy or polarizing. For some, it was leadership. For others, it was interpreted as arrogance. In today's NFL media ecosystem, perception spreads quickly. A single scouting critique can turn into a week-long storyline, and once a label sticks, it's hard to shake. Meanwhile, other quarterbacks in the class were being described with safer language: steady, coachable, high floor. Those phrases matter. Front offices often lean toward predictability over personality, especially at quarterback. Fair or not, the draft isn't just about talent, it's about comfort. Reports suggested that a few teams had internal debates about fit versus upside. Nothing officially confirmed, but whispers circulated. Did Sanders' playing style require a specific system? Would his brand and visibility add pressure to a rebuilding locker room? These weren't public condemnations, just the kind of quiet considerations that shape draft boards. By the time his name was finally called, the celebration felt mixed with validation. He was in the league, but the slide had already created a storyline. And that storyline followed him. Instead of entering as a top-tier investment with organizational patience built in, Sanders arrived with something to prove. Every practice rep carried added scrutiny. Every preseason throw became content for debate shows. The narrative wasn't just develop the rookie, it was justify the pick. That subtle difference changes everything. Because when a quarterback is drafted amid doubt rather than consensus belief, the margin for error shrinks immediately. One slow start fuels old narratives. One strong game is labeled an exception rather than growth. That's when the conversation quietly shifted from potential to pressure. When Kevin Stefanski was announced as the new head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, the reaction wasn't explosive, it was cautious. Around the league, executives described it as a stabilizing hire, measured, offensive-minded, experienced. On paper, it made sense. But in Atlanta, one question immediately surfaced: what does this mean for the quarterback? Because the Falcons had already invested in Penix Jr. Penix wasn't drafted to sit in uncertainty. He arrived with big-game credibility, a strong arm, and the expectation that he could eventually command the offense. But almost as soon as Stefanski took over, subtle signals started being dissected. Press conference language, depth chart wording, the way the front office described competition. Nothing dramatic, nothing definitive, but enough to spark conversation. Reports claimed Atlanta would evaluate all options at quarterback heading into camp. That phrase might sound routine, and in many cases it is. Coaches say it every year. Still, timing matters. When a franchise uses cautious language about a young quarterback before he's even fully established, fans notice. And that's when comparisons quietly began. Some observers pointed back to Cleveland. The early ambiguity, the careful phrasing, the absence of an emphatic public endorsement. To be clear, there's no confirmed internal conflict in Atlanta. No official sign of instability. But in today's NFL, perception forms fast, especially when history exists. Penix's situation carries its own complexity. His injury history has been discussed since draft night. Teams always weigh durability when projecting long-term plans. Stefanski, known for structured offenses, may simply be evaluating fit. That's football. That's normal. But when evaluation language feels open-ended, speculation fills the gap. Some fans believe Atlanta is hedging, protecting itself in case development stalls. Others argue Stefanski just wants internal competition to sharpen the roster. Both interpretations can exist at the same time. That's what makes the situation layered. Then there's the locker room angle. Veteran players pay attention to tone. When leadership clearly backs a quarterback, that belief trickles down. When messaging feels conditional, it can create quiet tension. Not chaos, just uncertainty. And uncertainty is dangerous in a division that's wide open. The Falcons didn't bring Stefanski in to rebuild slowly. They believe they can compete. That urgency changes how quarterback decisions are viewed. Is Penix being developed patiently, or is he already being evaluated under a win-now microscope? That's when the conversation shifted from excitement to scrutiny. A few weeks into Atlanta's off-season program, the whispers got louder. Not accusations, not headlines, just a familiar feeling some fans couldn't ignore. They had seen this movie before: different city, different quarterback, same subtle tension. That's when the word pattern started floating around. To be clear, there is no confirmed conflict inside the Atlanta Falcons. No verified report that Kevin Stefanski doubts Penix Jr. But perception in the NFL doesn't wait for confirmation. It builds from tone, from timing, from what is said and what is. In Cleveland, the messaging around the quarterback position often felt cautious. Public support was professional but rarely emphatic. When adversity hit, the language leaned toward evaluation rather than endorsement. Some fans believed that lack of overt backing subtly shaped how the locker room and media responded to struggles. Now in Atlanta, observers are dissecting similar cues. Stefanski has emphasized competition. He has spoken about earning roles. He has avoided nomming long-term guarantees. On the surface, that's standard coaching language. Many successful coaches preach internal competition, but in today's quarterback-driven league, franchises that are fully committed usually make it unmistakable. Think about how teams talk when they've truly chosen their guy. The tone shifts, the messaging tightens, doubt is publicly erased. That hasn't quite happened yet in Atlanta. Some fans believe that's strategic, a way to keep pressure healthy and standards high. Others suggest it mirrors what unfolded during Stefanski's tenure with the Cleveland Browns, where early ambiguity eventually turned into full-blown quarterback instability. Again, that comparison is interpretive, not factual. There's no official sign that Penix is on unstable ground, but history creates context, and context fuels narrative. Press conferences are revealing in subtle ways. When asked about Penix's development timeline, Stefanski has remained measured. He praises work ethic. He references growth areas. What he hasn't delivered is the dramatic "this is our franchise quarterback" declaration that instantly shuts down speculation. And in the absence of that statement, conversation fills the void. Some analysts argue that labeling this a pattern is unfair. Cleveland's situation involved unique contractual complications and roster pressures. Atlanta's environment is different. Different front office, different expectations, different timeline. But others counter with a sharper question. When similar uncertainty follows the same coach twice, is it coincidence or philosophy? Stefanski's offensive system demands precision, timing, trust in structure. Quarterbacks who thrive in that framework tend to be decisive and disciplined. If a young passer needs more improvisational freedom, friction can quietly emerge, not publicly, not explosively, just enough to feel misaligned. And that's the real tension. This may not be about distrust, it may be about control, about system loyalty versus quarterback identity, about whether a coach adapts to talent or talent adapts to scheme. If Atlanta fully commits, the noise disappears. If ambiguity lingers, comparisons will grow louder. Because in the NFL, patterns aren't declared. They're noticed. Leadership inside an NFL locker room doesn't announce itself with press releases. It reveals itself in small moments: who commands attention during film study, who players gravitate toward after a tough practice, who speaks when things go sideways. And that's where this situation becomes more layered than most headlines suggest. Coming out of college, Penix Jr was widely respected for his composure. Teammates praised his calm presence. Coaches talked about accountability. At Washington, he wasn't just putting up numbers, he was steering belief. That kind of reputation doesn't disappear overnight when a player reaches the league. But the NFL changes dynamics instantly. In Atlanta, Penix walks into a room with veterans who have seen hype before. They've heard the word future attached to young quarterbacks. Respect at this level isn't handed out because of draft position. It's earned in huddles, in third-down situations, in how you respond after a turnover. That's where coaching belief becomes critical. When a head coach visibly empowers his quarterback, the locker room feels it. Body language shifts. Communication sharpens, teammates rally more instinctively. It's subtle but powerful. On the flip side, when messaging feels measured or conditional, players can sense that too, even if nobody says it out loud. To be clear, there are no confirmed reports of division inside the Atlanta Falcons locker room. No verified tension between Stefanski and Penix, but leadership dynamics aren't always about conflict. Sometimes they're about clarity. And clarity matters. Some fans believe that young quarterbacks develop fastest when there's zero doubt about ownership of the offense. Others argue competition sharpens performance. Both philosophies exist across the league. The difference lies in consistency. If competition is preached publicly but hierarchy is clear internally, development can thrive. If both feel uncertain, confidence can wobble. History makes this conversation more sensitive. During Stefanski's time with the Cleveland Browns, quarterback transitions often felt abrupt. Public support remained professional, but the locker room navigated constant adjustment. Different starters, different rhythms, different leadership voices. That instability doesn't automatically point to coaching failure. Roster realities played a role, but it created an environment where quarterback identity never fully settled. Atlanta doesn't want that. The Falcons' roster is built to compete now. Playmakers expect the ball delivered on time. Offensive linemen need confidence in cadence and communication. Defensive leaders want assurance that the offense can respond after adversity. All of that circles back to belief in the quarterback. And belief isn't just internal, it's projected. If Penix feels fully backed, it shows in command. If he feels evaluated snap to snap, that tension can creep into decision-making, not dramatically, just enough to alter timing. In the NFL, a half-second of hesitation changes everything. Some analysts suggest Stefanski's structured system demands total alignment. Quarterbacks must operate within defined parameters. That works beautifully when trust is mutual. But when a young quarterback is still discovering his voice, balance becomes delicate. This isn't about drama, it's about development. Atlanta's locker room doesn't need noise, it needs direction. And how leadership frames Penix over the next few months could quietly shape not just his trajectory, but the culture around him. Because in the NFL, talent matters. But belief binds it together. Cleveland didn't just change a few assistants, they reset the tone of the building. After seasons of quarterback instability and public scrutiny, the Cleveland Browns quietly shifted their messaging. The language became sharper. The direction felt clearer. Instead of weekly evaluation talk, there was more emphasis on identity, accountability, and long-term structure. And that subtle change reshaped how people started viewing Shedeur Sanders. Because surviving turbulence does something to a young quarterback. When Sanders first arrived, he stepped into a storm. Expectations were heavy. The offense was inconsistent. National debate followed every snap. Fair or not, he was judged in real time inside a system that never fully felt settled. Some analysts labeled him raw, others questioned readiness. The narrative was loud and often unforgiving. But now the tone is different. Inside league circles, there's growing acknowledgement that Sanders endured circumstances few rookies face. Coaching uncertainty, veteran contract drama, offensive line adjustments, rotating play call rhythm. Development rarely happens in ideal conditions, and some evaluators are quietly revisiting their early conclusions. That's when the conversation shifted. Instead of asking whether Sanders was the problem, some are now asking whether he was navigating a flawed ecosystem. Reports claim the new coaching structure in Cleveland has simplified reads, clarified terminology, and emphasized building around quarterback comfort rather than forcing strict scheme adherence. While nothing has been officially declared about a permanent franchise commitment, the organizational body language looks steadier. And body language matters. Press conferences sound more unified. Teammates speak about cohesion. There's less weekly speculation about depth charts. Even fan discourse online has softened. Where criticism once dominated, there's now a tone of patience, even optimism. Some fans believe the reset proves Sanders was never given a fully stable runway. Others argue growth simply takes time and he's benefiting from natural progression. Both perspectives can coexist. Development in the NFL is rarely linear. But what stands out most is resilience. Sanders didn't publicly fracture under scrutiny. He didn't fire back at critics. He didn't appear rattled by draft night narratives that followed him into the regular season. That composure is earning quiet respect across the league. Quarterbacks are judged not just on arm talent, but on emotional steadiness. And enduring chaos without visible panic builds credibility. There's also a financial layer beneath the surface. Cleveland invested resources into restructuring the roster to create flexibility. When franchises start aligning contracts, cap space, and draft assets around a quarterback timeline, it signals direction. While the Browns haven't made sweeping declarations, the infrastructure now appears more aligned with long-term quarterback development rather than short-term patchwork. That alignment changes perception. The same media outlets that once dissected Sanders' flaws are now analyzing his ceiling. Instead of focusing solely on mechanics, discussions include leadership growth and system fit. That doesn't erase earlier struggles, but it reframes them. And here's the bigger question lingering beneath it all. If Sanders begins to thrive in a stabilized Cleveland environment, what does that say about the chaos that surrounded his early snaps? This isn't about rewriting history, it's about context. Quarterbacks don't develop in isolation. They develop inside structures, inside cultures, inside belief systems. Cleveland appears to be building one that feels more intentional now. If that foundation holds, Sanders' story won't be about surviving controversy. It'll be about outlasting it. What does all of this mean for Penix Jr? That's the question quietly hovering over Atlanta right now. Because while Cleveland recalibrates and Shedeur Sanders' narrative begins to soften, Penix is just stepping into the pressure cycle. And the NFL doesn't wait patiently for young quarterbacks to find their rhythm. It evaluates in real time. First, there's the football reality. Penix's injury history isn't media fiction, it's documented. Multiple college injuries force teams to weigh durability against upside during the draft process. That doesn't mean Atlanta doubts him, but it does mean every decision involving him carries an extra layer of caution. Repetition, workload, preseason snaps, all of it gets monitored more carefully. That caution can be smart, but it can also feel like hesitation if messaging isn't aligned. Some reports claim Atlanta wants to see more before making long-term declarations. That phrasing is normal in February. It's more noticeable when echoed deep into the offseason. When a quarterback is truly locked in as the unquestioned future, organizations tend to remove ambiguity early. They don't leave space for speculation to breathe. Right now, that space still exists. And in today's media climate, space gets filled fast. Some fans believe Stefanski's structured offensive philosophy demands a very specific type of quarterback discipline: tight footwork, timing precision, quick reads within design. Penix has shown he can operate within structure, but he's also at his best when attacking vertically and playing with rhythm. The key question becomes this: will the system bend slightly to amplify his strengths, or will Penix be asked to compress parts of his game to fit the blueprint? That tension isn't dramatic, it's developmental. Young quarterbacks thrive when confidence and clarity overlap. If Penix feels he has full organizational backing, mistakes become learning moments. If he senses evaluation hanging over each drive, internal pressure can accelerate, not visibly, not explosively, just enough to alter decision-making speed. Then there's the locker room dynamic. Veterans want stability, receivers want timing consistency, offensive linemen want a steady cadence and communication pattern. If Atlanta signals internally and externally that Penix is the long-term leader, the locker room will rally. If competition language lingers too long, subtle divisions can form, not factions, just uncertainty about direction. And uncertainty slows momentum. It's also important to separate narrative from fact. There is no confirmed quarterback controversy in Atlanta, no verified friction between coach and player. Much of the current conversation is driven by tone interpretation and league history. Some analysts argue that labeling this as a developing issue is premature. Others say patterns are easier to see early than after outcomes unfold. Both viewpoints deserve space. But here where things get interesting. Atlanta's roster isn't built for a slow rebuild. Skill position investments, defensive acquisitions, and cap management suggest a team that believes it can compete now. That timeline compresses quarterback patience. If early struggles surface, external noise will grow louder than it might in a long-term project scenario. And Stefanski knows that. If Penix thrives, this entire conversation dissolves. Strong camp performances, confident preseason command, early regular season poise. Success silences narrative faster than any press conference quote ever could. But if ambiguity lingers, if public endorsements remain measured rather than definitive, comparisons to past quarterback instability will resurface. Not because they're proven, because they're familiar. That's the fragile edge Atlanta stands on. This isn't about sabotage, it isn't about distrust, it's about alignment, coach, quarterback, front office, message. If those elements lock in together, Penix's trajectory stabilizes immediately. If they drift even slightly out of sync, speculation will accelerate. And in the NFL, perception can shape reality before reality has a chance to fully form. For Penix, the next few months aren't just about mastering a playbook. They're about securing belief. At the center of all this noise, speculation, and pattern talk, one real question remains. Is this about sabotage or belief? Because when you strip away the headlines, the comparisons, the social media debates, and the carefully worded press conferences, what we're really examining isn't scandal. It's alignment, it's conviction. It's whether an organization fully chooses its quarterback or cautiously evaluates him in real time. Look at how franchises operate when there's no doubt. When a team finds its guy, the messaging becomes unmistakable. Coaches don't hedge, general managers don't leave the door open for alternatives, teammates echo the same sentiment. The building rallies around one voice, Even during struggles, the public tone stays firm. He's our quarterback, period. That kind of clarity changes development. Mistakes become part of growth rather than evidence in a debate. Interceptions are corrected, not magnified. Confidence builds because the foundation underneath it feels stable. In the NFL, talent matters, but belief accelerates it. Now flip the lens. When messaging feels measured, when phrases like competition and evaluation linger longer than expected, it doesn't automatically signal distrust. Sometimes it's strategic, sometimes it's motivational, sometimes it's simply a coach protecting flexibility. But perception doesn't wait for explanation. In Cleveland, Shedeur Sanders entered an environment that never quite felt settled. Contract complexities, offensive inconsistency, public scrutiny. Some fans believe he was navigating more than just defensive schemes, he was navigating structural instability. Others argue he simply needed time and refinement. Now that Cleveland appears more aligned, the tone around Sanders is shifting. Analysts are revisiting early judgments. The conversation feels less accusatory and more contextual. That doesn't rewrite what happened, but it reframes it. And that reframing matters. Because if Sanders begins to thrive within a stabilized system, people will inevitably ask whether his early turbulence was circumstantial rather than personal. Not as an excuse, but as perspective. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Penix Jr stands at the beginning of his arc. There is no confirmed controversy, no verified rift, but there is observation. Fans are listening closely to every quote. Analysts are dissecting every non-answer. When a coach avoids absolute declarations, it sparks curiosity even if the intent is neutral. Some believe this cautious tone is simply part of Kevin Stefanski's philosophy. Structured competition, earned roles, accountability above hype. That approach has logic behind it. It can sharpen performance. It can maintain locker room edge. But quarterbacks are different. They are the axis of the franchise. When uncertainty surrounds that axis, even subtly, it shapes perception across the league. Veterans feel it, media amplifies it, opponents sense it. So the real question is whether Stefanski is repeating history. It's whether his philosophy requires a level of quarterback conformity that can unintentionally create early instability. Does the system fully bend to the quarterback's strengths, or must the quarterback adapt completely to the system's structure? That balance defines careers. If Atlanta publicly and internally locks in behind Penix, this narrative fades. Early struggles will be seen as growth, development will be patient, confidence will compound. If ambiguity lingers even slightly, comparisons to Cleveland will grow louder, not because they're proven, because they're familiar. And familiarity fuels narrative faster than facts do. But here's the twist most people miss. This may not be about right or wrong at all. It may be about timing. In Cleveland, instability came during transition. In Atlanta, evaluation is happening at the very beginning. Those contexts are different. Situations evolve, coaches adapt, front offices learn. Patterns only become patterns when they repeat without adjustment. So as this story continues to unfold, the focus shouldn't be on accusation. It should be on alignment, on clarity, on whether coach, quarterback, and organization speak with one consistent voice when adversity hits. Because adversity always hits. The NFL doesn't offer smooth trajectories, it offers tests. If Penix passes through early turbulence with visible backing, Atlanta's foundation strengthens. If Sanders flourishes in a calmer Cleveland environment, his narrative transforms from controversial to resilient. And that's the deeper layer beneath all the noise. Quarterbacks don't just need arm talent. They need belief strong enough to survive doubt. The real question isn't whether controversy exists. It's whether conviction does.